Let's go! Presented to you by La Pop, that is LAPOP. We are back with another stream for some Miami Marlins baseball. We wrapped up the Arizona Diamondbacks series. Miami now goes on to a 3-game set against the San Francisco Giants. It'll be Jesus Luzardo on the mound for game 1. You have Edward Cabrera for game 2. And then finally, it'll be Trevor Rogers for game 3. We have a very small panel today, hoping it grows a little as we go through the stream. But we are here with, as always, the usual Eli Sussman. And then we have a special guest here today, Kylie Urrutia. Kylie, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me. I'm actually really impressed that you nailed the last name. So not everyone gets that one. So attaboy. But I'm pumped to be
That's
here.
why he's hosting instead of me for this one. Yeah, to get that right. So yeah, Callie is part of the brand new Battered Marlins fan podcast that you guys just came out with it a couple weeks ago for the first time, and I enjoyed listening to it a lot. And so I'm excited for what you guys are doing over there. Every week you put out new episodes. Is that right?
Yeah. Every Thursday night we record. So usually it'll come out later Thursday night or Friday. In the next couple of weeks, we're looking to move into a more live format, but we're still kind of experimenting. But yeah, we have 2 episodes so far. We're going strong. So really happy that the Battered Network gave me an opportunity to be a part of it, part of the team. So yeah.
I think we will start with the Diamondback series where Miami ends up going 500. They're now at 8-8. They win the first 2 games. Unfortunately, they do lose the Sandy start, but we'll talk about that in a bit. I think we could go with game number 1. Eli, the bench bats came in clutch. Garrett Hampson made something happen. Garrett Cooper got it going 5 runs, and I think it was in 5 minutes. Wasn't able to watch the game. Trevor shoved. He looked good. I mean, it was just an all-around pretty good game just overall. I think Puck and Floro pitched in that game, so very impressive first game there.
That's one I was very optimistic coming into it about Trevor having a good performance, but also more so about Mad Bum just being over the hill. He's the type of personality and player that he was so good for so long in the most important situations that it's really hard to get your mind around the fact that he's just washed up at this point in his career. Even though the D-backs still have him in the rotation, he is the weakest link in their rotation. And after a couple very good innings by him, matching zeros, that 4th inning totally got away from him. As you mentioned, when Hampson, you want to give credit to Garrett Hampson for doing some damage there and stepping up an opportunity. It's just that we know Garrett Hampson is not a strong offensive player. It really has never been, and certainly not right now. So for him to hit a home run in any situation, I think that says almost as much about the pitcher than it does about Hampson himself. But that was a very fun rally because it was him. I think it was Birdie got a hit in there. It was the bottom of the order leading into the top of the order. As you said, I counted up as it was going on. It was really about in the course of 5 minutes, maybe 7 or 8 pitches that they scored all those runs back to back to back. You can't beat a rally like that. And that is kind of a new wrinkle with the pitch clock coming in where things are really unraveling for you as a pitcher and you can't slow it down. There's only so much you can do to like take a breath and collect yourself in between then. And Bumgarner certainly was not prepared for that. So that was very satisfying when for Rogers to go as deep as he did in the game. And then just about everybody else Very strong performance in that first game.
And then game 2, Miami comes from behind. They were losing 1-0. Braxton allowed a sac fly, and basically after that, he looked real good. And Garrett Hampson, as we mentioned, hit a homer in the bottom of the 5th. And Miami rallied back in the 7th inning to win it there. Miami went with a different bullpen look there. They went with Andrew Nardi. They went with Tanner Scott in a save situation. Oscar Brazoban pitched in the middle relief kind of setup role. Kylie, just your thoughts on that game where Miami just gets to the bullpen, because Ryan Nelson did have a very nice outing until the homer. They gave up, obviously Scott McGaw gave up the final 2 runs there.
Yeah, definitely a different look coming out of the pen that we've seen this year. I was happy that Tanner Scott especially had a chance to come in and kind of work in that closer role. It was awesome to see the fight from the team late in the game there. That's something that's encouraging, and getting 20 hits between the first 2 games of the series is something that I think we've desperately needed. But the pen looked great. I think pitching all around looked great in game 2. It's really encouraging to see guys like Rogers and Garrett really step up, especially since we have seen a couple Sandy struggles. But really encouraging stuff out of the pen. Good to see Brazoban perform. Good to see Nardi perform. And again, Tanner Scott getting that opportunity is absolutely huge. So
before we bring in Daniel for the press box report, just get into that final game. Isaac, we were there. All of Fish Stripes was there, to be honest with you, besides Eli and Grant, who weren't from Miami. Miami loses 5-0, gets shut out on Sandy Sunday against Zach Allen, who pitched a flawless game, basically, and flawless. Didn't allow a run. Basically, I think he only allowed 1 hit in the whole game. That was Brian De La Cruz, no-hitter going through 4 innings or 5. And Sandy just struggled in the 6th. Velo was up. He looked good, struck out 9. I don't think he walked a single hitter. And then finally, in the 6th inning, all hell broke loose, and he just lost it there. So your thoughts on Sandy's start and just the Marlins offense going from 2 phenomenal first games to just a very disappointing game 3 where they got nothing going.
Yeah, just one more thing on the second phenomenal game. Just the fact, I think Kelly mentioned Braxton, just what a great job he did, and Trevor Rogers, the 2 young lefties. Just the fact that they were able to come back, you don't really see it very often when the team was struggling to score runs and they fall behind late in the game and they come back and win it. That just doesn't happen very often, in my experience watching this team and covering this team. So that was great to see. And then regarding the Sunday game, man, yeah, what a deflating loss. You knew Zach Gallen was going to come out with everything he's got. You knew Sandy was going to come out a little bit better than he was in Philadelphia. But I think all hell broke loose, like you said, Kevin. Once he made that error, his body language completely changed. He was just not there. He gave up maybe 4 straight barrels after that, including a Corbin Carroll home run to dead center field. And Miami could not get anything going offensively. When they did get something going, there was a double play right away. 2 of their bigger base runners were when Avi Garcia swung at pitches that hit him. It just was not a great offensive day for Miami, unfortunately. But they got 2 wins. They won the series, and now they got to start winning another one. Back-to-back series would be swell.
And now we have Daniel Rodriguez here and John Rodriguez. They're not brothers, but for the press box report, Daniel, what are you seeing out there? And talk to us a little bit about what Skip said today pre-game. I know there were some injury reports and some news with Steven Oak, Sixto Sanchez, and all to get into.
So we got first off the injury report. I don't know if we're going to show it here, but it was a doozy. It was a big one. We have Chargois, upper biometric activity, so not throwing. Thank you for putting that up there. Avi will be reevaluated. Max Meyer 90 feet. Sixto felt good. I'm a little mad that Snow wasn't on mine, but I'll let it slide. But everyone else is doing all right. Right now, it's the Giants hitting BP. Not really a big crowd as you can expect for a Monday night. But overall, the team looks good. The Marlins are hitting BP out there. No Luzardo inside, obviously getting ready. But vibes look pretty good. The clubhouse at times was in and out in terms of having the amount of people there. But overall, it looks good. I like to see the Marlins. I think if there's a chance to sweep early on in the season, I think I'll believe this game. You have Eddie out there. You have Trev. You'll have Luzardo tonight going up against just the Giants, who are just riddled with injuries. I believe John Clearson's on the IL, was just placed there, I believe, yesterday, a couple of days ago with a wrist. The pitchers haven't really been that well. Logan Webb is sporting a 5 ERA so far, I believe, this season. So there's a time for a sweep will be now, especially everything the Giants went through last night in terms of the weather. But everything looks good. As you saw earlier, it was a big crowd for Skip. Skip just mentioning it wasn't even a lot. He probably just had a couple questions, maybe 2-3 questions. That was really it. One of them was just a Taylor Swift one, I guess, or whatever. But overall, it was good. Vibes are high. Anything you want to know? Maybe from here during BP, the Giants, the Marlins, anything that you guys were looking for?
How did
Was
Alvin
Soler?
Soler?
Yeah, was Soler taking BP out in the field?
But no, I didn't see Soler out there. Soler, I don't believe is ready for the bench. Avi is available off the bench. Yeah, I'll ask my source.
No, they're both available off the bench.
They're both available off the bench.
Soler is available off the bench, correct? Soler? I just confirmed with my source. Just making sure. But yeah, Avi. But yeah, they had BP. Birdie took BP. Hampson took BP. Hampson actually looked really good. I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. He looked pretty good out there. But yeah, everyone. What's up, Noah? Avi took BP in the cages. There you go.
Yes, we know, bro.
I'm repeating what Noah said.
Okay.
You're gonna beat me up with those.
All right. Anything else, Daniel, before we move on?
Nothing. The Giants look good, but I guess I don't know.
All right, we have your series
Definitely,
preview.
really.
We have your series prediction.
Can we play that video now, Eli?
Or unless you want to put it now. Yeah, I don't really.
Yeah, we'll play it now, I suppose. Give me one moment.
With a special.
Hey,
guest.
we're doing our series prediction for the Marlins versus the Giants. We're here live on the field. I'm here with Alex Aguirre from Lemon City Live. Alex, what's your prediction for this 3-game series versus the Giants?
My prediction for the 3-game series against the Giants is the Marlins are going to take 2 out of 3 from the Giants, and my MVP for this series is going to be the one and only Brian De La Cruz.
Oh, don't tell Noah that. For mine, I have also the Marlins taking 2 out of 3. Giants are riddled with injuries. They're coming off from a late night. Marlins take 2 games. MVP, Jesus Luzardo. I think Luzardo is going to have like 12 strikeouts. He's going to have a big game today, and I think the Marlins got it. That's it. Back to you, Eli.
You're going to be jealous, Daniel, that you're missing this stream because this is the one where at the end I'm debuting a new prediction time segment. We're going to have background music, and we're going to do something different that you're not going to be included in because you're at the ballpark today. But now we have that in. So thank you.
You're muted.
I blame Noah.
All right, Daniel. Thank you for joining us, and I think we're just
always a pleasure. Anything else you guys want? Last second.
No, you're good.
Anything at all?
I want you to leave now. I'm joking. I love you. All right, goodbye. All right, that was the press box report. Very well done. So I want to talk about Sandy. Anyone here worried about Sandy? I mean, I wouldn't say I'm worried whatsoever. He still shoved. He struck out 9, didn't walk anyone. John, I want to get your thoughts on the Diamondback series, and if you're the slightest bit worried about Sandy with his struggles as of, I guess, these last 2 starts.
I'll mention Sandy first. Honestly, I think something that we've learned is that Sandy is human. There's going to be games where he's going to be knocked around a bit. We saw it last year with the Dodgers, and then he came back and did his masterful job again. I think there's still 20-something more starts yet for Sandy to bounce back and prove that he is the Cy Young that he was. So I'm not really faded by 2 bad starts. Even though I wouldn't really consider the last start bad. He just had 1 bad inning. You mentioned it, 9 strikeouts. I mean, can't ask for anything more. The team just couldn't hit and score for him. It's just a sloppy game on the offensive side as well. With the D-back series, you got to be happy. We're talking about a team who didn't lose a series, and they finally came to losing against the Marlins. So honestly, pretty stoked about that. If they could continue their strides and play 500 baseball along the way, we're looking good.
So I want to bring up the injury report because there are a couple things to talk about there, and I think the main one would be Steven Oker, which we all assumed would be back with the team today. We thought we would see maybe a roster move or 2. So Isaac, your thoughts on Oker not back in Jacksonville, and what could be the case that they still want to throw him out there and probably make sure he is a 100% good to go, although he has looked pretty good with the jumbo shrimp. And you're muted.
It's pretty strange because I tweeted out a few days ago that, expect him back on Monday, and, here he is. He's not going to be here. After almost 5 innings already at AAA, you'd think, he's ready. But I think the only thing that I could think of is that they mentioned the back-to-back days thing, and Skip has been using a lot of his major league arms on back-to-back days, religiously, and Brazoban and Floro and Puck. So I guess they just want to make sure that Okert is, prepared for that situation. So I guess now you just assume that he's on the trip to Cleveland when they go on Wednesday afternoon or Thursday. So yeah, that's the only way, you think of it, because usually relievers don't need that many rehab outings before they come back, but I guess Okert does.
Callie, I want to get your thoughts on Sixto. Extended spring training game he threw there. We heard he hit 97. Your thoughts on those reports, and just your overall thoughts on Sixto and his possibility of coming back onto a big league mound at some point in his career.
I'm glad you put it that way.
Yeah,
because it definitely echoes my thoughts. The promise is there, right? Like we hear about the hype, and Sixto almost just feels like a myth at this point, because we hear all these stories of performance and extended spring games where he's touching 97 and all this stuff. But if it doesn't translate to the big league level, if you can't stay healthy, none of it matters. So I'm going to take the good news with a grain of salt. I'm really excited that he's chucking it again and he's feeling good, and he's lighting up the radar gun. But until he's able to stay healthy and stay on the roster, and none of it matters. So one step at a time. I'll ease my expectations, but I'm still very encouraged.
Eli, I know you're very vocal about Sixto, so I want to get your thoughts on what you may have heard from the extended spring training game and the bullpen as well.
You have to acknowledge that the velo being at not a normal level, but being substantially higher than it was during the spring is a sign of progress. But they've been consistent that regardless of his good days or his bad days, that this entire process is going to be very deliberate. So I imagine there will be at least one other extended spring outing before they even consider an actual rehab assignment, that this continues to just go at a very methodical pace, where I think even compared to a typical rehabbing pitcher, they want to leave more time in between these steps than we're accustomed to seeing. So I won't really, I still have him in the very back of my head, even though this was obviously a nice step forward. With Steven Okert, I was just surprised that they didn't use him back-to-back games this weekend on Saturday and Sunday. I did think that was going to be like the milestone that they want to get over before bringing him up. And for whatever reason, he didn't get into yesterday's game. So that's why it gets pushed back a day to Tuesday and Wednesday, and where we might not see him presumably until this weekend in Cleveland. So that was a little bit odd to me, though, frankly, the bullpen's been pretty good. And I do want to touch on JT Chargois, the fact that he's still not throwing. I think that speaks to the severity of the oblique strain. I don't think that we ever got like a very clear diagnosis from the team, but this is, I would assume, a grade 2 strain as opposed to the a grade 1. And with that increased severity, it does seem like it'll be a fairly prolonged absence for him, just considering all the time that's needed to tune up once he is throwing again in that case. In the meantime, that has not been an issue, but that's going to continue to be something to watch moving forward, is whether the bullpen can be as reliable as it's been so far, especially with such a key piece being out for the time being. And you don't know exactly what you're going to get from George Soriano or Devin Smeltzer. Devin Smeltzer still hanging around this team very quietly. Yeah. In the back of the clubhouse with his feet up, just in case anybody absolutely needs him. So, yeah, in the meantime, this past week in particular, they've been able to overcome some questions about the back end, about the, the bottom guys on their bullpen hierarchy. It's just that's something that I don't know if that's going to sustain. This team, as we touched on, they've won every one-run game they've played this year. That's been such a departure from last year. The guys are getting it done in the most important situations out of the pen. And once that isn't totally the case, then I think that's when things could go pretty badly. There's still like some concern in my mind about the bullpen in general.
And then the other report I want to mention is Johnny Cueto threw a bullpen 35 pitches. I believe he threw this on Saturday, from what I was told personally. In that same game, Sixer just extend a little of the injury report. Nick Enright threw in that game, and minor league signing. No one really cares, but I'll mention it. Ronald Bolaños threw 3 innings as well as Enright. So nice to see those guys progressing. Richard Rodriguez is in Jupiter. Archie Bradley, we think he may be in Jupiter. That one's not confirmed, but I think that is what we'll go with the injury report. Moving on, I guess. Well, I wanted to mention the Pablo extension. We saw Pablo this offseason get dealt by the Marlins. He is now a Minnesota Twin, was dealt with along with Jose Salas and Byron Churio in exchange for Luis Arias. He actually got a contract extension first reported by Craig Mish of Sports Grid, 4 years, $73 or $74 million extension. You can't be happier for Pablo right now. I mean, we have to be super happy for this guy. Very well deserved. I will say this now: if he was still a Marlin, that he would not have gotten that extension. Probably not even gotten an extension. So, Isaac, your thoughts on the Pablo extension?
It's just crazy to think how young he is still. You know, he is still, like your Stripe said, he still has free agency at age 32. And I think he's really cementing himself. He has a solid first half, solid year, cementing himself as one of the better starting pitchers in Major League Baseball. And if Luis Arias wasn't tearing the cover off the ball, I think Marlins fans would be going crazy. So, like Kevin said, there's not a better human being in baseball that deserves this more than he does. The numbers seem about right, in my opinion, for someone of his caliber, and the fact that Minnesota is really depending on him to lead the rotation for the next few years. It all makes sense, and like I said, I'm very, very happy for Pablo. No one deserves it more than he does, and kudos to him.
John, your thoughts?
Couldn't have said it any better. I mean, that's amazing for him, for a guy who spent a solid amount of years here in Miami, started his career here in Miami, traded as possibly just a back end piece of a trade. And if I remember, it was David Phelps. I think it was what the trade was. So to be able to overcome that and establish himself as one of the better pitchers in today's game is just amazing. I don't think there's anybody who deserves it more than him. I'm happy for him, and I hope he continues to shove. That's what he did, and that's what he'll continue to do.
If you're
I just want to point out the timing of this deal to come here in the middle of April when we're already several weeks into the season. This is not typical. This would point to me about anybody that is getting extended around this time of year. These are extensions talks that must have begun before opening day. And I find that fascinating in Pablo's case because of how extraordinary he's been through his first 4 starts with the Twins, leading the majors in strikeouts. And every of those starts has been very good. He's just been consistently great in each of those outings so far. With the addition of this new breaking ball, he has this sweeper that is so much more deadly than the breaking ball that he was using with the Marlins, one that he wasn't really that comfortable in, one that he really couldn't get swings and misses for. So this new breaking ball has kind of elevated his game and made him a more complete pitcher. And I also think it got him like a little bit extra money on the end of this. When I saw him, I believed that he was an extension candidate as soon as this trade went down. I would imagine that the initial discussions between them were at a much lower number than $73.5 million, or perhaps they may have included some sort of option at the end that doesn't allow him to get back on the market so soon. He did everything in his power to give himself leverage so early in the year, emerging as we could like revisit where he is in terms of all baseball, but he's probably the ace of the Twins rotation right now. And that gives him leverage in these negotiations. You got to feel great for him, the way that all this has lined up. And naturally, the question that a lot of people have brought up in the immediate aftermath is whether the Marlins should do the same thing with Arias to make sure that this deal is truly equitable on both sides. If the Twins are going to get in total 5 years of Pablo this year and the 4 of the extension, then the Marlins on the other end, do they want to go even beyond what they have with Arias, considering that his start to the season has been just as amazing as Pablo's has been?
I think you should extend the rise, and I think this is a point that all of us have said. Now the question is whether Miami will not extend the rise, because they waited a while with a couple guys who they've extended in the past, and when they have, it's been very low offers. I mean, Miggy Rowe, we saw Blyers who did not work out at all. Those were, I guess, the most recent ones. I know Eli mentioned Joey Wendell in our Bold Predictions podcast when we did Fish Stripes Unfiltered. I think you should extend Arias. I know he has a couple of years, I believe, of arbitration left, but you have to extend this guy as soon as possible because his value is just going to get higher. And that goes not only with Arias, but I think Luzardo also deserves the extension soon. That's the only other player I'll mention. Obviously, the burden will be, or not burden, the issue is Sandy, who has that, what is it, $59 million extension or 56. You're probably gonna have to pay. You're probably gonna have to pay under that for each pitcher you extend on the Marlins. And the question becomes, will you extend a pitcher on the Marlins? And obviously, the candidate is Jesus Luzardo, who you traded a very valuable piece in Starlin Marte in. And yeah, that's how I'll put it.
Kevin, this echoes back to when you said at the beginning of the trade that the Marlins traded Pablo López, the pitcher, for Pablo López, the hitter. So it's time to kind of replicate that to the Marlins side of things and extend the rise with the start he's having too.
Yeah, if I can interject, yeah, the sweetener for the Pablo deal would obviously be if we extend the rise, right? So if it's great for Pablo, and I think every Marlins fan will probably echo the sentiment that, you know, we all loved watching him pitch. He, like, for me, he was one of my he's been one of my favorite guys to watch since probably Jose. So we, you know, to trade kind of a central figure like that for a guy who you know, AL batting champ, you know, Silver Slugger, all the accolades. If we let it go into arbitration, it's only going to get bad for us, I think. So I think if, you know, while the emotions are high, while we're playing well, I know it's only April, but I think, you know, the time to strike is sooner rather than later, because if we let him test the waters, I don't think he's coming back.
Isaac, what would be the value you put on Arias right now if you had to give him the extension?
We were talking about
your idea of extension.
We were talking about in the meeting somewhere. What it'd be in between Cronenworth and McNeil's. Eli, I think Eli's better off to give.
Yeah, in Jeff McNeil's deal, Jeff McNeil is probably the most comparable player, period, in baseball to Arias with everything they do, the positions they play, the extreme contact ability, and overall offense. McNeil is a lot older, but I think he's also slightly better, if we're being honest and looking at a big sample size. So he got 4 years and 50 from the Mets at a much later stage of his career. With Arias, I think that average value is right around about 12 million, 12, 13. I think you could get that done. But he just turned 26 years old. He's even as young as we think Pablo is. Arias is even younger. So with him, it's just the length of it. Where we saw Cronenworth, he got a 7-year deal, 80 million. And I think lengthwise, that is what Arias would be looking at. Something in 7 years that maybe even gives him an opportunity to opt out a couple of years early if he's performing at an amazing level. Somewhere in that 7-year, $85 million range. I think that's what they're looking at, where the total number has some shock value to it. It's just, but the average annual value is about the same as what Sandy got on his deal, and that's a lot more affordable than what Pablo is getting right now. So in relation to where baseball is, I think that would be totally reasonable to do like a 7-year deal like that with him. And in the same way that Pablo has, I think, upped his value in just a few weeks, I think Arias is the same way, where so much so that if they didn't even start extension talks before the season, then I really don't see it happening during the season at this point. This is something most likely that you revisit during the off season. But once they revisit it, that's kind of the general range that I'm thinking of for him.
And with that being said, I think we will go. You had something to say, Isaac?
No, I'll wait for after.
After this, we will be going very quick dive into the minor leagues just to take a look at what's happening there. And we will preview the Giants series and prediction time. Back after a break or commercial ad from our great sponsors at La Pop. And we are back, Fish Stripes Live, presented by La Pop, that is LAPOP. And we are going to take a very quick dive into the Miami Marlins minor league system. I want to dive into AAA because there's a certain player right now who is leading the international. It's the International League, Eli.
Mm-hmm.
International League in homers, and that is Peyton Burdick, who has 7 homers. This guy has been mashing in AAA. There's just no other way to say it. John, your thoughts on Peyton Burdick's season so far? Doing it all, putting bat to ball contact, hitting for power, getting on base. He's doing it all.
It's good to see, coming from a guy who got the call last year, got an opportunity to play a couple games and didn't really show for it. It's nice to see a bit of a bounce back sign, and it's good for the Marlins. A nice fresh breath there. If there's a guy in the major leagues that starts to regress, then Peyton Burdick should get the call. And the question turns to, when will that be? Is there a certain person now that they could turn to and send down to call up Peyton Burdick in an emergence, to give him a couple at bats and see how he performs in the major league level? But to see him do what he's been doing at the level that he's been doing it at, it's really, really nice to see. So honestly, kudos to Burdick, who's been absolutely mashing it.
Right now, Burdick is hitting 351, 422, 789, WRC plus of 197. The league average is 100. And his OPS is 1.211 right now.
Yeah. What I want to point
12.
out is he does lead the International League in homers. He also is right around the league lead in strikeouts, 23 strikeouts in 14 games for somebody that is repeating a level. He spent all of last year at this level until getting his cup of coffee in the majors. And I've spoken about him quite a bit already. I am pretty high on him. I do love his ceiling. If he puts it all together, he has reminded me so much of a Josh Willingham light, that type of player, where I think there is a pretty high potential for both walks and home runs that you'll get from him. And even more so than that, his ability to at least fake it in center field, that's been the biggest surprise from draft day to now, is that he could actually play all 3 outfield positions when you need him to. His athleticism is pretty impressive for the type of plays that he is another guy that certainly you need some sort of fallback option behind Jazz that you really trust offensively. And I think he is even a more logical candidate than Brian De La Cruz for that particular fit on the roster at this moment. I do want to note that Craig Mish, Marlins insider, something that he brought up today and extrapolated on a little bit is the status of Jesus Sanchez, who's been, as much as we like to point fingers at Avi Garcia and the expectations around him, I mean, Jesus has been about as disappointing as any player on the entire roster to this point in the season. So even though he's out of options, eventually they may have to make some sort of tough decision on him if they don't feel like he's turning the corner, if they don't feel that he's really putting all of his ability to good use. I mean, Callie, where are you with the Jesus Sanchez experience? We've had a pretty big sample of it going back to 2021, and it's been a lot of ups and downs, so many downs last year. And then this almost feels like rock bottom from what he's done in the big leagues.
Yeah, Jesus has been struggling, man. It's, it almost becomes a question of, how many more chances do you continue to give him? Because he's just not producing. And yeah, we've seen some things, but I think that we have enough of a volume size that we should shake it up a little bit. I think Burdick is a great guy that, I think he's on the cusp of, what more are you going to ask from him on the minor league level? And, I think we're in a position right now, especially I think if we look at how long Avi might be out for and Sanchez isn't producing and stuff like that, like, why not give him a shot? Why not call up a guy like Burdick and let Sanchez maybe go back down, or I don't know. I'm very close to to being off the Sanchez train at this point.
Especially with someone like, in the position that Miami's in right now, where Jesus Sanchez right now has been ineffective. He's barely done anything. The most he's done was, I believe, ground out to Avi Garcia to third base, and that allowed the Marlins to bring in Luis Arias to drive him in for that game against the Diamondbacks. So that's really about all he's done. Burdick, on the other hand, has done it all in AAA Jacksonville. And I want to mention one more player. He's actually on this list right here. You look at the number 9 spot. Never would have thought we'd be talking about this guy, but CJ Hinojosa is having himself a wild season for the Jacksonville Jumbo Shrimp. He is hitting 386, 417, 750, OPSing 1.167, WRC plus of 186. definitely someone who we should keep an eye out on, just to, when you need a bench bat or a fresh player, a fresh bat. CJ could definitely be a guy who you call up. He's not on the 40 man right now, but I wanted to get Isaac back on this. Your thoughts on Sanchi and his tough start, and is it time to maybe cut ties with him to bring in someone like Burdick, who's doing what he's doing right now in Jackson?
It's so tough, Mr. Kevin, because he's someone that I could attribute some of his struggles to just not getting ample playing time. They're giving it to Brian De La Cruz and Avi Garcia, which, they obviously deserved it more. Avi, he's got the big contract attached to him. But he hasn't really gotten 3 starts in a row or even back-to-back starts that I can remember off the top of my head. So I will give him the benefit of the doubt that if he were to play, 140 games, his numbers would be better than batting 0.95, which is what he's batting right now. But at the same time, he really hasn't shown as much of an adjustment as I would have liked. In spring training, he did show that adjustment, and it sort of seems like he just went back to how he was this April. And I haven't seen the adjustment that I would have liked. And it's just tough to, because you mentioned it. He's got you mentioned it. He's got no options left. So if he were to get DFA'd or sent down, he's gonna be picked up almost instantly, I would assume. But you have Brian De La Cruz, who's hitting over 300, who's playing very well. He's playing fantastic. You have Peyton Burdick, who's playing very well in AAA. So you could sort of maybe afford to take that risk and lose Sanchez, but he's the only lefty of the group. He's also probably got the most power, maybe a little bit more than Burdick. So it's a tough one. I think Craig nailed it. He's got to show something soon. If not, by May 1st, they're gonna check somewhere else for some power. But yeah, if they started him, he could have like 30 home runs. It's bullshit. They don't give him the playing time. I assumed that he was gonna get more playing time than Brian De La Cruz, and I was wrong.
Brian De La Cruz is the one who's shown more too, and had the better spring training.
Delish. It's crazy.
And on top of that, Burdick had the better spring training out of both of them. And, unfortunately, his toe injury really set him back and put him back in AAA. But then CJ Hinojosa, who I want to talk about very, very quickly. Eli, your thoughts on him, and can he make his way to the roster as a bench bat at some point? Because he's definitely never going to be a starter on this team, unless it's like a getaway day or Sunday game.
At some point, yeah. At some point, eventually. I do like him more than Garrett Hampson as if you want to make that comparison. Like, I feel like he could be one of the 13 best position players on a roster at a particular time. I really like him offensively, and he's even had a couple really standout moments defensively so far this season at several different positions. He could do second, short, and third. I think realistically at the big league level, not a shortstop, but those other positions, he's been around a while. I don't think he's played in the big leagues yet, so this would be potentially finally his big break. But I don't think it's a very high priority just because of the position that he most likely will play at. They already have a million second basemen on the big league roster. And Gene Segura is somebody that we can focus on, not right now, but I think in the near-term future, there have to be some tough questions about Gene if he continues to struggle as much as he is. But for the time being, they seem fully committed to having him as the everyday third baseman. So there's just between them and obviously John Birdie eventually going back into his utility role. That's not really a big weakness for the team that you worry about them addressing too much. I'm more interested, frankly, in the AA guys that I know you had on your mind before the stream. Nasim Nunez, who already is showing more power this year than we ever thought he could show. And Paul McIntosh down there continuing to hit well as play the outfield. That's almost a brand new experience for PMAC, who has been focused as a catcher entirely in his development until now, having some flexibility in them. It has entering this year was just a very unusual minor league assignment approach where they sent so many of what we feel are their highest ceiling players to Pensacola instead of Jacksonville, even those that felt like they might be ready for promotion. Between those guys I mentioned, on the pitching side, having Yuri Perez and Dax Fulton, Pensacola is off to a very intriguing start this season. And I'm wondering how many of those guys could make it up before the end of the year.
I like what I've seen from Nasim Nunez. I know, we joke around a lot about the guy, but the guy's been showing power. Very surprised there. And then also you have Troy Johnston, who shedded 10 pounds. He's been getting a lot more extra base hits, stealing a lot more bases. He said he wanted to do that. Victor Mesa Jr.'s looked pretty good. Joe Rizzo's the only other player in that roster who I'll mention. But I guess we want to mention the two studs on that team, who are Yuri Perez and Dax Fulton. Isaac, what have you seen from them so far?
I watched the last Yuri start. it's tough with him. I don't know. He's such a hard player to scout. At this stage in his career, he should have probably been at AAA. But I'm glad he's getting AA because I think AA is a much tougher level to play. And the command seems to be the only thing that slips him sometimes. But other than that, the stuff he's throwing 98 with ease. He's throwing strikes, but then when he misses, it'll get to his head and he'll allow some hard contact. He gave up a home run to Chorio, if I pronounce that right, one of the top prospects in all of Major League Baseball. But I'm very excited for when Yuri comes up, and I still think he will make his Major League debut this season.
And then finally, I want to mention the one guy who surprised me, though. It's AA, Pat Monteverde. 0 ERA, 145 FIP, 1-0. He's striking out. I don't have the number in front of me, but he's looked real good. Eli, I know you've spoken about him a little bit on the chat. So your thoughts on his start? Definitely won't be a major league starter for the Marlins in the stable rotation, but definitely a name to keep an eye out on, who's looked pretty sharp in the first two starts.
He could prove to be about as valuable as anybody from that 2021 draft class, which overall has not made a very quick or sexy transition to the pros. That's the Khalil Watson draft and the Joe Mack draft. To this point, Monteverde late last year, kind of in the middle of last year, is when I thought I saw a flip switch with him. He is just a really deep pitch mix. The swing and miss has been a very big surprise early on this year. I don't think that's really something to reasonably expect moving forward. He's going to be somebody that is going to have a fair amount of pitch to contact in him and rely more on deception than he is on overpowering guys, just because the fastball is not particularly standout from a velocity perspective. But he's the deep pitch mix. And to this point, the consistency that he's shown since the middle of last year, where even when he's off his game, he goes 2.5 times through a lineup, if not 3 full times. And he's an older player. He's already 25. And I think he turns 26 even before the season is over. There's not really any projection left. This is who he's going to be. And the other side of that is that means you really don't shy away from accelerating him through the system and giving him aggressive assignments as well. That's been a nice standout. And the final one on the very lower levels, the one who's been producing even at just as high a level as Monteverde, is Jacob Miller. That was the first pitcher they took in last year's draft. Yeah. And he just got his Florida State Pitcher of the Week honors for having 6 no-hit innings this past weekend for Jacob Miller. Very exciting for him. Only 19 years old as we're talking right here. So they'll be more deliberate with his production as well. Just good to see somebody that they think is eventually going to be a rotation piece for them get off to a really hot start while pitching against older competition in low A.
And the final player we'll mention, Yidi Kape. We have to mention something about high A Beloit. Probably the most intriguing team to watch. For the ones that are watching, I highly suggest you to watch some high A Beloit. That's where Khalil Watson is. Yidi, you have a couple nice pitches there, but Yidi's having himself a nice year. 294, 316, 618. 149 WRC plus, 2 homers, 9 RBIs. John, Cuban, yourself, you love this guy. Your thoughts on his hot start to the season?
I've always addressed how high I've been on Yidi since the day they signed him. I've loved that guy. He's such an energetic person too, in person. So fun to talk to. To be as hot as he's been, you said it, 294, I think you said that he's been hitting, and he's got an OPS over 900. I mean, that's fantastic for a guy like Yidi. Only 20 and he's in Beloit, so if we could get him over to AA pretty soon, hey, he's climbing up the ranks pretty quick, and he's been playing up to a very, very nice level. We'd like to see a couple more steals. I think he's capable of doing that.
Do you think does he project for you as a shortstop, Isaac?
I think he winds up at third base, same profile as Salas. But what you like with him is that he's slugging so much. He's got like 3 doubles, a homer, a triple. A few homers, triple. Kid's a god, bro. We saw him in the inter squad games in spring training. He got a couple hits when I saw him play. Yeah, just if he hones up his strikeouts a little bit. Like I feel like that's the common thing with all these prospects. But it's not put the ball and play more often, and the ball's going to leave his bat very fast. So we're very excited for him to get maybe some high A, AA experience next season.
Yeah, and with that being said, as much as I want to keep talking minor league baseball, we do have a series to preview here. Giants and Marlins. If we could please put up those lineups where I think they're already both out. And we're back with the Baseball Savant lineups. We have some percentiles we could look at. Callie, what stands out to you on the Marlins lineup, and then if you want to go a little bit into the Giants side of things.
With the Marlins lineup, I mean, it really looks like their approach is, if it's not broke, don't fix it. A lot of consistency in the lineup, which is great because, aside from yesterday, we've been hitting the ball really well. At least better than I think a lot of us anticipated. I think top five, the top five of the lineup is, we have to be really happy with. It's the bottom half that obviously makes us scratch our head. Isaac, you got to be excited. Your boy's getting a start, Jesus Sanchez. So let's see if he adds that 30 home run total today. And I love it because, they had to make that trip from the West Coast. Logan Webb has really been struggling. I don't think he has a win yet. His ERA is over 5. I think I think we're in a great spot to take a big win here to set the momentum for the rest of the series. So, I'm happy with the lineup so far. I personally love Fortes behind the plate. If you listen to Battered Marlins at all, I'm a bit of a Fortes fan. So, love him behind the dish. So I'm excited.
Yeah, the last time the Marlins faced Logan Webb, Jesus Sanchez was hitting third in the opening day lineup for Miami. Hitting third, Jesus Sanchez. Boy, how quickly things drop off. Should they DFA him? Wow, huh?
Yeah.
Amazing.
One thing to point out with the Marlins is the shortstop change. Garrett Hampson playing this one. John Birdie, very quietly, had played every inning of every game at short since Wendell went out with his injury. I was not expecting them to even go that far with him in that particular case, but he's in a vacuum. I think he's the superior player to Hampson, so I like to see it. And overall, the team had a decent amount of success with that combination. So this is Hampson's first start at shortstop since being called up from the minors. And aside from that, it was already touched on in the press box report that Avi recovering from that wrist contusion, but available off the bench, and Soler. I don't even think it's the back injury anymore. I think this was just a regular off day for him. He's also available. Yeah. So in that case, people that were quietly praying for Avi to have a slow recovery from this contusion, that doesn't seem to be the case. It seems that he's still sticking around, and that will continue to be a storyline to follow moving forward. The rest of the series and beyond is how often he plays and how well he plays. From the Giants' perspective, they are a team that is not playing well. Like, this is arguably the easiest opponent that the Marlins have faced at this point. They're 5-9 on the season. And JD Davis, who is in bright red right in the middle there, he's the one that is really standing out for their team thus far. I think we may have touched on Jock Peterson earlier, that he's out. He's on the IL. He won't be playing in this series, and that puts a lot of pressure on JD Davis. Their number three hitter is Darren Ruff. And Darren Ruff had some good years with the Giants, but Darren Ruff was cut by the Mets a couple weeks ago. The Mets didn't even want to put him on their roster, and now he is batting third in their lineup against Jesus Luzardo. I think that just shows you how few options they're really confident in. Like, going down, Mike Yastrzemski, he's had some success through the years, but most of that was now several years removed from his breakout. Across the bottom, Joey Bard and Helio Ramos, they both started the year in the minor leagues. And Brandon Crawford, he had that out-of-nowhere revival in 2021. And then since then, he's been like your typical number 9 hitter. That's kind of where he belongs at this stage of his career. It's not a very good offensive team. Their biggest strength to this point has been their starting pitching. Logan Webb kind of being the exception to that. Logan Webb has not been performing in this early going quite as well as they thought, but the rest of their rotation has been, and that's been keeping them in some competitive games to this point. Any way you slice it, I think this is the most beatable team that the Marlins have faced, coming off a week where they just won series against 2 other opponents. So there is, from seeing the predictions that have come in before the stream, there is a lot of optimism about the Marlins, and I think understandably so.
Is Helio Ramos still considered a top prospect?
No. I think you have to go back to 2021 when there was some hype about him.
I remember that.
I think, part of it is, I think on the team as well, they never really gave him a long leash to play every day just because they were a very good team in 2021. They had all those veterans that were kind of squeezing him out. He never really got that extended stretch to try to prove himself. I think converting to the big leagues, the tools that they thought he had just weren't as exceptional in reality as they looked like they were playing in AA and AAA. He's a name that comes to mind because of Did you have to go all the way back to the Stanton negotiations that Ramos was like part of that?
That, and I believe didn't he make his debut
Marte.
against the Marlins or no?
It was either his debut or very early on. I think you're right about that.
Helio
Very
Ramos. Well, while Eli's looking for that, I want to ask.
You're right, Isaac. He did make his debut against the Marlins.
Okay. He made it on
April
opening day, right? It was opening
April
day, right?
10th.
Oh no, okay.
He went
I want to
2 for 3.
I want to ask John, how important is this start for Trevor Rogers? And I think it's tomorrow. No, I lied. Game 3, final game of this 3-game set. After shoving the last start against the Diamondbacks, how important is it for him to keep this consistency?
Well, Eli mentioned it. The Marlins were playing good baseball against teams who were looking very competitive, and this is the most beatable team to do it. So if there's one start that Trevor really needs to kind of show for it and make up and just continue his stride from that last game is against the Giants. So we could start to see a little bit more upward trend with T-Raw. I think we saw a bit of his 2021 looks in last start. So if we could get more than 5 innings from Trevor and he's throwing back up to north of 5-6 Ks, then we're looking good. We're looking good with T-Raw. So honestly, if you could do that, perfect.
And then Cali, Edward Cabrera had a much more improved start from what we saw the first 2 times with New York and I believe some other team. Who was it? The Mets.
He faced the Mets each of the first 2 times.
Twice. Yeah.
It was Mets, I think.
Yeah,
Phillies.
Mets, Phillies. And now he faces San Francisco tomorrow. What are your expectations for him? What do you want to see from Edward Cabrera?
Well, for that, I think I want to point to some comments that Skip made about him. And he says that it's not the ability that's made him struggle, it's what's between the years. And I think his approach on the bump again, when he in his last outing, when he looked really solid, it was much more curveball heavy. He wasn't relying on the fastball as much. And we saw him really just start spotting it up where we saw in the first 2 starts, I think he had 14 or 15 walks in the first 2 games. And he really dialed it back, I think, in that last start against the Phils. And, we saw a different Edward Cabrera. So it's a matter of can we keep that momentum going? And if we see it against the Giants, I think we're in a great spot, especially if the curveball keeps biting like it was and if he continues to spot it like it was. But if he gets inside his own head again, then unfortunately we might see the merry-go-round start going again. But my hopes are high. I trust Mel with our staff, and I think him and Skip both acknowledge that it's not the lack of ability; it's the more mental aspect. So hopefully something happened with that last start, that the flip switched, and we're in a good space moving forward now.
Yeah, so speaking of that, I actually had a question for Eli because that curveball initially was just a sort of get me over pitch when he can't really throw a strike, use it to maybe steal a strike, steal a pitch, and if that becomes more, then what is it? Is it something that he throws along with the slider? Which one's better at this point? I think the slider he hasn't really shown a great ability to use this year. What do you do with those 2, decent breaking balls?
That has been a surprise of his major league career so far, is that the slider just hasn't worked as well as I thought it was. That was really his only breaking ball at certain stage of his development. It wasn't until, especially last year in the minors, is when I started seeing him use the curveball more often and in different situations and then getting success with it. You have to evolve as a pitcher. And I wouldn't be surprised if we reach a point in the near-term future where the curveball is like the predominant breaking ball. And I don't know if they'll ever phase out the slider altogether because there is some value in having that extra velo on it. And there are certain situations against especially other righties to throw that low and away to them. That is still going to make more sense than trying to spot the curveball right there with him. He is a very complicated player. And I envision what the upside looks like, but as I've talked about before on this platform, I have some doubts about him being a starter altogether. It's all about just finding the right combination of using those pitches in a way that he's comfortable doing so. We will see. Every single start with him is worth looking very carefully. He earns himself much. Thankfully, he had that outing when he did, because we were reaching a point where you got to be seriously concerned about him just being able to throw strikes altogether. And I think he is better than what he showed those first 2 starts against the Mets. So that last outing was very good to see. You'll just want to see something similar this next outing against, as we touched on, a very beatable opponent in the Giants.
Because even against lefties, I think that slider is huge. Like Sandy was actually using the slider as his strikeout pitch yesterday more than any other pitch against the left-handed hitter's back foot slider. And if Edward can have that pitch as well, like learning from Sandy, man, go take him out for a drink, learn how to throw it well. Because holy shit, he's got as impressive as of an arsenal as anyone in the rotation. I mean, like Braxton and Luzardo have a pretty nice one too, but Edward can throw it all.
And with that being said, it is time for prediction time with just 5 minutes left in the show.
It's time for prediction.
This is prediction time.
It's time.
Yeah, let me try to lead us through this because I'm doing this a little bit differently than we've done before to make it go as smoothly as possible and as social media friendly as possible afterwards. So very quickly, let's see where we are with this leaderboard overall through the first 5 series of the regular season.
Yesterday, right?
I think so. I think most people got 1 or 2 from yesterday, and Kevin is still sitting at the top of the leaderboard. And it's a big jam in the middle, a mix between our staff, our stream guests, and our super subscribers. So across the bottom of the screen, I'll remind people that if they want to participate in prediction time before every single series, all they got to do, go to Twitter, pay the $2.99 a month. And that's one of the many subscription perks that we offer in here as well. But we have a whole lot of predictions already coming in for this particular one. What I'm going to do is instead of trying to update the headlines in real time, I'm just going to ignore that part of it. Let's see if it lets me do so and turn off those headlines as we one moment. And then we're going to also play around with some background music in here as well, just to give it a little extra level of intensity.
Some Drake?
No, it's copyright free music. It doesn't even have any audio in it.
Kevin's
we'll go one at a The way it works, as everybody else is familiar with, and just to get Callie up to speed, we just pick how many games the Marlins are going to win in this series and who's going to be the series MVP. It could be on the Giants or it could be on the Marlins, regardless of who you pick to win the particular series. But we'll go, one at a time. Why don't we start with Isaac? Your series predictions.
I believe that the Marlins will win 2 out of. I believe they'll sweep. I think they'll win all 3, and I believe Trevor Rogers will be the MVP.
John Rodriguez, your predictions?
Well, I think the Marlins will win 2 out of 3, and I have Garrett Cooper as my MVP.
Cool.
Our other guest, Callie, your series predictions.
I do think we win 2 out of 3, and I think this is going to be a great series for George Soler to smash some baseballs, and so I'm excited about that.
Who?
Soler. Going with Soler.
I'm going to go Marlins sweep, and the MVP will be... Let's go with Brian De La Cruz.
What?
I feel good about that one.
And to cap it off, my series predictions. I have the Marlins winning this one 2-1, 2 out of 3. Series MVP, Jazz Chisholm Jr. He's been hearing all the haters. He's off to a slow start offensively. This is where it really clicks and turns on for him. A bunch of extra base hits for Jazz and a bunch of clutch hits for him to lead the Marlins to yet another series win at Lone Depot Park.
All right. So we're all pretty confident, and I think that is where we're going to end it. Callie, thank you for joining us as always. John, always on here whenever we need him. Thank you for joining us. Anything else, Eli, we should mention before we wrap this up?
That should be just about do it. I didn't actually get all of the elements that I wanted in there, but we're experimenting with that to bring out the best. Another shout out to La Pop for continuing to sponsor this stream. As they have been doing throughout this entire season to this point, allowing us to take the stream to new heights. We appreciate it.
Yeah.
And check them out at lapop.com, LAPOP.com. Check out their place in Doral.
and Fish Traps and Filter drops this week. We may have a very cool guest. You guys will all be very excited to watch. But that'll do it for us from Eli, Isaac, John, Callie, and myself. We'll see you guys on the next one. Peace out and go fish.